Not through anything exotic, just through the blunt arithmetic of a 6'1" frame launching serves into spots that Eala's left-handed return game couldn't consistently redirect when fatigue arrived in the third set. The scoreline told a story Eala already knew but hadn't yet solved. She could dominate stretches of matches against powerful opponents, sometimes dominate entire sets, and then watch the architecture collapse the moment her intensity dipped by even a fraction. That collapse pattern defined the first half of her season. Some brilliant wins scattered among defeats that felt too familiar. A loss to Noskova in Indian Wells. Another in Stuttgart where the clay complicated things further. There were enough good results to keep the ranking climbing, enough bad ones to keep the skeptics comfortable. And then Washington happened. The Mubadala DC Open was not supposed to be a coronation. The draw was brutal. Zheng Qinwen in the second round. Leylah Fernandez, the defending champion after that. Naomi Osaka in the semifinals. Jessica Pegula, the world number 3 and tournament top seed, in the final. You cannot fabricate a path like that. Each round presented a different tactical problem, a different physical demand, and a different psychological test. Eala solved all of them, and the way she solved them is what makes tomorrow's match in Toronto something more than a routine second round. Against Zheng, she was down a set and had to grind back. She won in 3, taking the decider 6-1. Against Fernandez, she fell behind 1-5 in the second set and somehow clawed back to win it before closing out the match. Against Osaka, she was clinical in a way that startled even the people who had been tracking her progress all year, winning 6-4, 6-2 with the kind of tactical discipline that doesn't usually show up in 21-year-olds. Against Svitolina in the quarters, she was precise and aggressive simultaneously, the two qualities that used to fight each other in her game now finally cooperating. And in the final against Pegula, she trailed by a set when rain suspended play overnight. She came back the next day, won 10 of the last 13 games, and closed the match with a 6-0 third set in which Pegula won exactly 8 points. That third set against Pegula is the thing Parks should be thinking about. Not because it guarantees anything about tomorrow, but because of what it revealed about the internal wiring that now governs Eala's competitive behavior. A year ago, even 6 months ago, a rain delay while trailing the world number 3 in a final would have introduced exactly the kind of psychological noise that had historically rattled her. The old Eala would have come back tight. The old Eala would have been thinking about the scoreboard, about the occasion, about the Filipino flags in the stands, and what a loss would feel like with all those eyes on her. The new Eala came back and suffocated a top 3 player in 45 minutes. She won the title. She became the first person from the Philippines to lift a WTA Tour singles trophy. And she moved to a career-high ranking of number 20 in the world. Now about Parks and why she is genuinely dangerous despite looking like a clear underdog on paper. Her 2026 record sits at 22-23, a losing season by any measure. She has no titles. Her ranking has drifted around the 60s and 70s all year. She has lost early in most of the big events. But here is the thing about Alycia Parks that pure statistics cannot convey. She doesn't play like someone with a losing record. She plays like someone who hits the ball harder than almost anyone on tour, but hasn't yet figured out how to sustain that balance for more than stretches at a time. On any given night, when her serve is landing and her forehand is finding the corners, she is capable of overwhelming opponents ranked well above her. The inconsistency goes both directions. She can look like a top 20 player for 2 sets and a qualifying round player for a third, sometimes within the same match. That volatility is what makes her so tricky in a best-of-3 format, and it is exactly what made Melbourne such a painful lesson. Think about the mechanics of that Australian Open match. Eala was flawless in the first set. Her return game was dialed in, Parks was getting rattled by the crowd, and the 6-0 seemed to confirm everything the occasion demanded. Then Parks did what Parks does when the situation looks most hopeless for her. She stopped thinking. Not in the pejorative sense. She literally stopped calculating and started swinging. She found her first serves. She started cracking forehands to the corners. She let her physicality take over, and the match transformed into a contest where Eala's tactical intelligence was being outrun by pure ball striking. Parks hit 12 aces in that match. 12. Against a player whose return game is widely regarded as one of the best among the younger generation on tour. That number tells you something about the kind of firepower Eala will have to manage tomorrow night. But this is Toronto, not Melbourne, and the differences matter. In Melbourne, Eala was playing her first ever Australian Open main draw match on an outer court that happened to be packed beyond capacity with Filipino fans. The emotional charge was immense and unsustainable. She fed off it in the first set and then couldn't regulate once the energy flipped. In Toronto, she arrives as the 20th seed at a WTA 1000 event, playing the night session at Sobeys Stadium, a venue that seats thousands. The Filipino community in Toronto is massive, reportedly the largest in Canada, and tickets for Eala's session sold out rapidly. The crowd will be enormous and almost certainly partisan. But here is the critical difference. This is not Eala's first rodeo with stadium-sized partisan support anymore. She played the DC Open final in front of a packed house flying Philippine flags. She played Osaka in a semi-final atmosphere that was electric. She played Fernandez in Canada's backyard and silenced a crowd that started firmly against her. The emotional management system has been stress-tested at higher and higher levels throughout 2026, and it has held. Parks knows this. She said in Melbourne that crowds against her put a fire under her, that she performs well under hostile conditions. And she wasn't wrong. She proved it. But there is an important distinction between a crowd that rattles you and then fuels your opponent when you rally, which is what happened in Melbourne, and a crowd that expects its player to win, which is what will happen in Toronto. In Melbourne, the Filipino fans were excited and hopeful. In Toronto, after the DC Open title, after the top 20 ranking, after the 7 top 10 wins, those same fans will be expectant. That expectation lands differently on both players. Eala has to manage the weight of being the favorite. Parks has to find a way to punch through the noise without the underdog adrenaline that fueled her comeback 7 months ago. Tactically, Eala's game has evolved in ways that specifically address what Parks did to her in January. The left-handed serve has improved markedly over the course of the season. In Washington, she was landing first serves at a high clip and generating enough variety on the placement to keep returners off balance. Against Parks, whose return game is average at best, that could be decisive. If Eala holds serve comfortably, Parks has to find breaks against a player whose defensive baseline game has matured considerably. In Melbourne, Eala's backhand started misfiring in the third set, producing forced errors that gave Parks free points at critical moments. The Eala who played Pegula in the DC Open final did not make those errors under pressure. Whether that composure translates to a rematch against the specific opponent who triggered those errors is one of the real questions of the match. Parks' path into this second round was not smooth. She beat Victoria Jimenez-Casanseva 6-4, 6-4, a solid win against a talented young player, but she had to fight off a wobble in the second set after building a 5-1 lead. She was broken twice while trying to close out the match before finally breaking Casanseva again to seal it. That kind of late-match fragility is exactly the sort of thing Eala can exploit. One of the defining traits of Eala's Washington run was her ability to seize momentum at inflection points. Against Fernandez, she was 1-5 down and won 5 consecutive games. Against Pegula, she was a set down and won 10 of 13 games. Eala in August 2026 is a player who has learned to smell vulnerability and attack it, and Parks in the closing stages of matches has shown that vulnerability repeatedly this season. The physical dimension cannot be ignored. Eala played the DC Open final on Sunday night, with the match completing on Monday after the rain delay. Today is Tuesday. Tomorrow is Wednesday, and she plays the night session. That is a brutally quick turnaround from a title run that included 5 matches in 7 days against top-caliber opposition. She played 3 setters against Zhang, Fernandez, and Pegula. The cumulative toll on her body is real, and Parks, who had a lighter week in the first round, will be fresher. Fatigue shows up in specific ways in tennis. The serve loses a few miles per hour. The legs arrive a half-step late on wide balls. The decision-making on whether to attack a short ball or play it safe gets clouded by physical reluctance. If Parks can push the match into a physical grind, extend rallies, make Eala cover the full width of the court, she could find the version of Eala that Melbourne revealed, the one whose game deteriorates when the body starts sending distress signals. But Eala addressed this directly after Washington. She said she ended the tournament in better shape than she started, that each match improved her conditioning as the week went on. She also noted, with characteristic self-awareness, that rain delays are something she has dealt with her entire career, and that the experience, while higher stakes than usual, was manageable. The training base she has built at the Rafa Nadal Academy in Mallorca appears to be paying physical dividends. She has played a grueling 2026 schedule across clay, grass, and hard courts, and the fitness has generally held up even in three-set battles. The question is not whether she is fit enough to play. The question is whether she is fit enough to play at the level required to prevent Parks from finding the openings that a half-step of fatigue would create. There is a narrative layer here that extends beyond the tactical matchup. If Eala wins, she faces a likely third-round collision with Linda Noskova, the number 8 seed and recent Wimbledon champion. Noskova has beaten Eala twice this year in straight sets, including at Indian Wells. That is the match the tournament organizers are hoping for. That is the match the draw was built to produce. But the draw does not care about storylines. Parks stands between Eala and that opportunity, and Parks has beaten her before. The last time these two played, Eala was the crowd favorite, the better-ranked player, and the one who took the first set without dropping a game. She still lost. If there is a lesson in that Melbourne match that transcends the tactical details, it is that tennis does not reward comfort. The moment Eala felt comfortable at 6-0, the match changed. The moment she assumed the trajectory of the first set would continue, the reality of competing against a 6'1" athlete with a massive serve reasserted itself. Parks' serve is the fulcrum. If she lands upward of 65% of her first deliveries and mixes her placements effectively, she can hold serve without much stress and put all the pressure on Eala's service games. Eala's serve, while improved, remains the less dominant weapon in her arsenal. She wins points through her return game and her ability to control rallies from the baseline with that whipping left-handed forehand and the increasingly reliable backhand. But you cannot return serve if your opponent is acing you, and Parks has the physical tools to generate free points on serve that very few players in the draw can match. Watch for the middle of the second set. That is where this match will be decided. If Eala takes the first set, which her current form and ranking suggest she should, the match enters the territory that Melbourne defined. Can she sustain the level? Can she avoid the trap of thinking the job is halfway done? Parks will not go quietly. She never does. Even in matches she loses, she tends to make it uncomfortable. And in matches where she senses an opening, where she can smell fatigue or doubt, she transforms from a player with a losing record into something considerably more formidable. The Sobeys Stadium crowd will play its part. The Filipino community in Toronto has been waiting for this moment. Eala is no longer a prospect they hope will do well. She is a champion they expect to advance. That shift in energy, from hope to expectation, changes the atmospheric pressure inside a stadium. It creates a floor of support that can carry a player through difficult stretches, but it also creates a ceiling of disappointment that lands harder when things go wrong. Parks dealt with the Melbourne version of this crowd and won. Whether she can deal with the Toronto version, larger, louder, and now carrying the weight of a freshly minted title and a historic ranking, is a different test entirely. Here is what I keep coming back to. The Alex Eala who played Parks in January was a talented player still figuring out how to manage the space between her potential and her performance. The Alex Eala who walks into Sobeys Stadium tomorrow night has beaten Zheng Qinwen, Leylah Fernandez, Naomi Osaka, Alina Svitolina, and Jessica Pegula in consecutive matches across a single week. She has 7 top 10 victories in 2026, tied for the most on tour with Rybakina and Svitolina. She has a WTA title. She has a top 20 ranking. She has evidence, accumulated over months and verified under the most extreme competitive pressure the tour can offer, that she belongs at this level and can sustain it when the stakes escalate. Parks has none of that contextual armor. What she has is a body that can generate extraordinary power, a serve that can bail her out of trouble, and the specific knowledge that she has already beaten this opponent once this year. She knows Eala's backhand can break down under sustained pressure. She knows that the left-handed serve, while improved, can become predictable on second delivery. She knows that the crowd will be against her, and that this has historically activated rather than diminished her competitiveness. Both players will walk onto that court carrying information the other cannot fully account for. Eala carries the confidence of the greatest week of her career. Parks carries the memory of having dismantled that confidence once before. The hard court surface in Toronto will not dramatically favor either player. It is a neutral canvas on which the